I watched my daughter-in-law crush a pale blue pill into my wife's holiday drink right in the middle of our Christmas party. She stirred it with a candy cane and smiled at the guests like it was just sugar. But I saw everything. In the 5 seconds she turned her back to check her reflection in the mirror, I stepped forward. I did not hesitate. I switched the glasses. 20 minutes later, she wasn't smiling anymore. She was screaming at the guests, tearing at her designer dress, and collapsing onto the buffet table. My son looked at me with pure hatred and screamed, "Dad, what did you do to her?" I just looked back at him calmly and said, "I did not do anything, son. I just returned the gift your wife intended for your mother." If you want to know how a retired structural engineer took down a greedy pharmacist and saved his wife from a living nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now let me tell you how the war began. My name is Harold Foster. I am 70 years old, and for 40 years I worked as a structural engineer in Chicago. My job was to look at massive buildings and identify the stress points, the invisible cracks that could bring the whole thing down. I know that when a foundation is rotten, it does not matter how fresh the paint on the walls is. The collapse is inevitable. That Christmas Eve, standing in the corner of my own living room, I realized the foundation of my family was not just rotten. It was toxic. The house was filled with the smell of pine and roasted turkey. 50 guests were mingling under the crystal chandeliers I had installed for Beatrice back in the 80s. My wife Beatrice, or B as I call her, was sitting in her favorite armchair by the fireplace. She looked frail. Her hands were trembling slightly as she tried to unwrap a gift. Beatrice comes from old money. Her grandfather was a railroad tycoon, and she has a trust fund and commercial real estate portfolio worth about $18 million. But lately, her memory had been slipping. She would forget where she put her glasses or repeat a story she just told. The doctors said it was early-onset dementia, just a part of aging. But looking at her that night, she did not look like she was aging naturally. She looked drugged. Her eyes were glassy, and her movements were sluggish, like she was moving through water. Then there was my son Preston and his wife Tiffany. They were standing near the bar, whispering. Preston is 35, a man who has never held a job for more than 2 years. He calls himself a crypto entrepreneur, but I know a gambler when I see one. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car, but he was sweating. He kept checking his watch and looking at the door as if he was waiting for a bomb to go off. And Tiffany. Tiffany is 30. She is a pharmacist, or she used to be before she lost her license, for reasons she never fully explained. She was wearing a red velvet dress that was a little too tight and a smile that was a little too sharp. She was playing the role of the perfect hostess in a house she did not own yet. I decided to make myself invisible. It is a superpower you gain when you get old. People stop seeing you. They look right through you. I moved to the shadowed alcove near the kitchen entrance, pretending to fiddle with the thermostat. From there, I had a clear line of sight to the drink station. Tiffany was preparing the traditional eggnog. She poured a heavy dose of rum into a crystal glass, added the eggnog, and sprinkled nutmeg on top. Then she reached into her bra and pulled out a small blister pack. It was not a pharmacy bottle. It was a foil strip with foreign writing on it. My engineer brain kicked into high alert. Beatrice takes 3 medications, 1 for blood pressure, 1 for cholesterol, and a multivitamin. They are all white. The pill Tiffany popped out of the foil was blue, a distinct chalky blue. She crushed it between 2 spoons, turning it into a fine powder, and dusted it over the nutmeg on top of the eggnog. She stirred it in ensuring it dissolved completely. Then she wiped the spoons with a napkin and threw the napkin in the trash. It was precise. It was practiced. It was cold. She picked up the glass and turned toward the living room, a sweet, predatory smile plastered on her face. But then vanity got the better of her. She stopped at the hallway mirror to adjust her lipstick and check her teeth. She set the glass down on the console table next to her own glass of red wine. This was my variable. This was the stress point. I moved. I did not run because old men do not run without drawing attention. I walked with purpose. As I passed the console table, I pretended to stumble slightly using the table to steady myself. In one fluid motion, I slid the eggnog glass to the right and the wine glass to the left. Then I poured the contents of the wine into a nearby plant pot and poured the spiked eggnog into her wine glass. It took 4 seconds. I continued walking toward the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer, but my face remained stone. When I looked back, Tiffany had finished admiring herself. She picked up the wine glass, the one now containing the blue powder mixed with Merlot, and marched into the living room. She handed the clean, empty eggnog glass to a waiter to refill for Beatrice. Wait, no. She picked up the wine glass for herself. She took the eggnog, which was now just safe eggnog, and handed it to Beatrice. Here you go, Mom, Tiffany said, her voice dripping with fake honey. I made this one special for you. It will help you relax. Beatrice smiled, that trusting, gentle smile that made my chest ache. Thank you, dear. You are so thoughtful. Beatrice took a sip. Tiffany raised her wine glass. To family, she said. To the future. She drained half the glass in one gulp. I stood by the fireplace, gripping my cane, and waited. I calculated the variables. If she was a pharmacist, she knew the dosage. If she intended to give that to Beatrice, an elderly woman with a frail heart, the dose must be strong enough to sedate her, or worse, cause a psychotic episode that would prove she was incompetent. 15 minutes passed. The jazz music played softly. People were laughing. Then the cracks started to appear. Tiffany dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china plate. She giggled, but it was not a happy sound. It was a wet, guttural sound. It is hot in here, she announced, slurring her words. Why is it so hot, Tiffany? Are you okay? Preston asked, putting a hand on her shoulder. She shoved him away with surprising strength. Get off me, you loser. You are sweating on me. The room went quiet. The guests exchanged awkward glances. Beatrice looked concerned. Tiffany, dear, maybe you should sit down. Sit down. Tiffany's eyes were wide, her pupils dilated so much her eyes looked completely black. Why should I sit down, you old witch? This is my house, or it will be as soon as you sign those papers. Preston turned pale. Tiffany, stop it. You are drunk. I am not drunk, Tiffany screamed, swaying dangerously. She grabbed the tablecloth and yanked it. The turkey, the gravy, the candles, everything crashed onto the floor. I watched her face. Her muscles were twitching. Saliva was gathering at the corners of her mouth. This was not alcohol. This was a severe reaction to a potent sedative or antipsychotic. She pointed a shaking finger at the guests. Look at you. Vultures. You are all vultures waiting for the scraps. But I win, we win. The money is ours. Then her eyes rolled back into her head. She convulsed once, violent and sharp, and collapsed face first into the mess on the floor. She began to foam at the mouth. Chaos erupted. Someone screamed. A woman fainted. Preston dropped to his knees all beside her, shaking her. Tiffany, Tiffany. Wake up! Call 911! I shouted, my voice cutting through the noise. Preston looked up. His eyes scanned the room and landed on his mother Beatrice, who was holding her cup of eggnog, trembling in fear. He pointed at her. It was her. She did this, what? Beatrice gasped, dropping her cup. It shattered on the hardwood floor. She poisoned her. Preston screamed, his face twisted with a desperation that told me everything I needed to know about his financial situation. Mom has been mixing up her meds all week. She must have put something in Tiffany's drink. She is dangerous. She is crazy. I stepped between my wife and my son. I stood tall, squaring my shoulders. Be careful what you say, Preston, I warned him, my voice low and dangerous. Look at her, Preston yelled, playing to the audience, playing to the family lawyer who was standing by the door. She is confused. She does not know what she is doing. We need to get power of attorney right now before she kills someone else. The paramedics burst through the door. As they loaded Tiffany onto the stretcher, Preston grabbed the arm of the lawyer. You saw this, Higgins. You saw what happened. Mom is mentally unstable. We need to file the paperwork immediately, for her own safety. I watched the flashing red lights of the ambulance reflect off the snow outside. I looked at my wife, who was crying silently, confused and terrified. And I looked at my son, who was already calculating how this tragedy could be twisted into a victory. He thought he had won. He thought this proved Beatrice was incompetent. He thought he was days away from controlling $18 million. But he forgot one variable. He forgot that I was the one who poured the drinks. And he forgot that I had kept the empty foil wrapper from the trash. As the ambulance pulled away, Preston turned to me, a cold, triumphant sneer on his face. We need to talk about putting Mom in a facility, Dad. Tonight. I gripped my cane until my knuckles turned white. No, son, I said. We are not putting anyone anywhere. But you are right about one thing. This is the end of the way things used to be. The war had started. And unlike them, I knew exactly what the weapon was. The antiseptic smell of the emergency room at St. Jude Hospital was sharp enough to burn my nostrils. It was 2 a.m. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing flicker that made everyone look like a corpse. I sat in a hard plastic chair, my hands resting on my cane, watching my son pace back and forth. Preston was still wearing his tuxedo, but the bow tie was undone, hanging around his neck like a noose. He was sweating, checking his phone every 30 seconds, probably seeing if his creditors were calling yet. Beatrice was sitting next to me, wrapped in a hospital blanket, staring blankly at the scuffed linoleum floor. She was terrified, confused, and shivering, not from cold, but from the shock of seeing her daughter-in-law foam at the mouth. A doctor pushed through the swinging double doors. He looked exhausted. He walked straight to Preston. Family of Tiffany Foster, he asked. Preston nodded frantically. I am her husband. Is she okay? What happened? The doctor glanced at his clipboard and then looked at us with a grave expression. She is stable now, Mr. Foster. We performed a gastric lavage to pump her stomach and administered activated charcoal. She is lucky you got her here when you did. The toxicology screen came back positive for a very high concentration of barbiturates. Barbiturates. My grip on the cane tightened. That was an old-school sedative. Heavy stuff. Dangerous stuff. Not something you pick up at the corner drugstore. Preston looked confused for a second, and then his eyes shifted to Beatrice. Barbiturates, he repeated. Like sleeping pills. The doctor nodded. Yes, but a dosage this high is not recreational. It is lethal. If she had arrived 20 minutes later, we would be having a very different conversation. She is awake now, but she is groggy. You can see her for a few minutes. We followed the doctor into a private room. Tiffany was lying in the bed, hooked up to an IV drip. Her skin was the color of ash, and her hair was matted with sweat. She looked small and frail, a stark contrast to the predator in the red dress I had seen earlier. But when she opened her eyes, I saw it. The glint was still there. The calculation. She looked at me, and for a split second, there was fear. She knew. She knew the glass she drank from was the one she had prepared for Beatrice. She knew I was the only one who could have swapped them. But then she looked at Preston, and the mask slammed back into place. Tears started welling up in her eyes, spilling over her cheeks in a perfect performance of martyrdom. Preston, she croaked, her voice raspy from the stomach pump. Oh God, Preston! I was so scared! Preston rushed to her side, grabbing her hand. Babe, what happened? Did you take something? The doctor said it was sleeping pills. Tiffany squeezed his hand and looked past him directly at Beatrice. She let out a sob. I did not take them, Preston. Not on purpose. I did it for her." She pointed a shaking finger at my wife. Beatrice flinched, shrinking back into her blanket. "What are you talking about?" Preston asked, looking between them. "I saw her," Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "In the kitchen before the toasts. Mom was holding the bottle. She was crying. She said she was tired, Preston. She said she did not want to be a burden anymore. She poured the pills into the eggnog. She was going to drink it." The room went silent. I watched the performance with a cold detachment. It was brilliant in a twisted way. She could not admit she poisoned Beatrice, and she could not admit I poisoned her without revealing her own crime. So she chose the third option. She made herself the hero. I panicked. Tiffany continued crying harder now. I did not want to cause a scene. I did not want anyone to know. So I grabbed the glass from her. I thought if I drank it, she would not be able to. I did not know there were so many pills in it. I just wanted to save her. Preston stood up slowly. He turned around to face us. His face was red, his veins bulging in his neck. He looked at his mother not with concern, but with a horrifying realization of the opportunity she had just handed him. "You tried to kill yourself," he hissed at Beatrice. Beatrice shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Preston. I did not. I do not take blue pills. I only take the white ones. I do not know what she is talking about." "Don't lie to me," Preston shouted, making the nurse in the corner jump. "Tiffany almost died saving you. You tried to commit suicide at a Christmas party. Do you have any idea how sick that is?" I stood up, placing myself between my son and my wife. "Lower your voice, Preston," I said calmly. "Your wife is lying. Beatrice has never had a suicidal thought in her life." Tiffany let out a loud wail from the bed. "He does not believe me. He hates me. I almost died for this family, and he hates me." Preston spun on me, poking a finger into my chest. "Stop protecting her dad. Look at the facts. Tiffany is in a hospital bed because of Mom. Mom is confused. She is forgetting things. And now she is suicidal. She is a danger to herself and everyone around her." He was not just angry. He was excited. I could see the gears turning in his head. This was the narrative he needed. This was the leverage. He turned back to this doctor, who was watching the family drama with an uncomfortable expression. "Doctor, you heard this. My mother attempted suicide, and my wife intercepted the poison. I need this documented in the report. Mr. Foster." The doctor said carefully, "This is a family matter. We treat the patient. But if there is a risk of self-harm regarding your mother, a psychiatric evaluation would be standard procedure." "Do it," Preston demanded. "Evaluate her. She is losing her mind." Beatrice grabbed my arm, digging her fingers into my jacket. "Harold, please. I want to go home." I did not do it. "We are leaving," I announced. "Beatrice is not undergoing any evaluation based on the word of a woman who was hallucinating 20 minutes ago." I started to guide Beatrice toward the door. Preston stepped in front of us, blocking the exit. He was desperate. He had $4.5 million of debt hanging over his head, and he saw his golden goose trying to walk out the door. "You are not taking her anywhere, Dad," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing low tone. "She is not safe with you. You are in denial. You are old, and you can't watch her 24/7. Look what happened tonight. If Tiffany hadn't been there, Mom would be dead." "Get out of my way, Preston," I said. He didn't move. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it up, recording us. "Go ahead, Dad. Take her. But I am documenting this. I am documenting that you are removing a suicidal woman from medical care against medical advice. And tomorrow morning, I am filing for emergency guardianship." There were the words. The trap had sprung. Emergency guardianship. Conservatorship. He wanted to strip us of our rights. He wanted to declare Beatrice incompetent, take control of her assets, her accounts, her life. And once he controlled her money, he would control mine. He would liquidate the real estate portfolio to pay off his gambling debts, and he would stick Beatrice in a state-funded facility to rot. I looked at Tiffany. She was watching us from the bed, her eyes dry now, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her pale lips. She thought she had won. She thought her improvisation had checkmated me. Preston took a step closer, invading my personal space. Let's be real, Dad. Mom needs professional help, a facility, a nursing home where they can make sure she doesn't swallow a bottle of pills again. It is for her own good. And since you clearly can't handle it, I will take over. I will take power of attorney. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I could feel Beatrice trembling against me. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the greed, the desperation, the absolute lack of morality. He was willing to imprison his own mother to cover his mistakes. I knew that if I fought him right there, if I caused a scene, he would use it against me. He would say I was aggressive, senile, unfit to care for her. I had to play this smart. I had to play this like an engineer. I needed to relieve the pressure before the structure broke. I lowered my head, feigning defeat. I let my shoulders slump. I let the hand holding the cane shake a little more than necessary. Preston, I said, my voice sounding tired and old. We are all exhausted. It has been a terrible night. Let's not make decisions right now. Let me take your mother home. We can discuss the future in the morning. Preston scrutinized me. He saw an old man who was overwhelmed. He saw a father who was finally accepting reality. He lowered the phone. Fine, he said. Take her home. But first thing tomorrow, we are sitting down with the lawyer. We are signing the papers, Dad. No more delays. Mom goes into a home and I take over the finances for her safety. I nodded slowly. We will talk tomorrow. I steered Beatrice out of the room past the nurse's station and into the cold night air. I did not look back. But as I helped my wife into the car, my mind was racing. They thought they had me cornered. They thought the threat of the nursing home would force me to surrender. But they made a mistake. They showed their hand too early. They told me exactly what they wanted and exactly how far they were willing to go. Preston wanted a war. Tiffany wanted a war. As I drove away from the hospital, I touched the breast pocket of my coat. Inside was the foil wrapper I had fished out of the trash can at the party. The one with the foreign writing. They wanted to put my wife in a home, over my dead body. Tomorrow the counterattack would begin, and I knew exactly where to start looking. The bathroom trash can in the guest suite they were currently occupying in my house. The war was coming home. The morning of December 26th broke gray and cold. I was sitting in the kitchen nursing a cup of black coffee when the front door opened without a knock. Preston marched in carrying 2 large suitcases. Tiffany followed him, wearing pristine white medical scrubs, dragging a garment bag. They didn't say hello, they didn't ask how we were. They just started moving in. We are staying until this situation is resolved, Preston announced, dropping his bags in the hallway. Mom needs 24-hour supervision, and since you won't put her in a home yet, we are bringing the care to her. It wasn't an offer. It was an invasion. I watched from the kitchen island as they systematically dismantled our lives. They pushed my favorite reading chair into the corner to make room for a station Tiffany set up. She laid out pill organizers, blood pressure monitors, and charts on the antique coffee table. It looked less like a home and more like a triage center. I will handle all of Mom's medications from now on, Tiffany stated, her voice clipped and professional. No more mix-ups. No more accidental overdoses. I am a trained professional herald. You are just a husband who is out of his depth. I didn't argue. I couldn't argue, not yet. I needed them to think I was beaten. I needed them to get comfortable, so I just nodded and sipped my coffee, watching her line up the bottles. But I noticed something. She didn't use the bottles from our pharmacy cabinet. She pulled new ones from her bag. For the next 2 days, the house became a prison. Tiffany established a strict schedule. Beatrice was confined to the bedroom for rest and observation. Every time I tried to go in and sit with her, Tiffany would block the door. "She is sleeping, Harold," she would say, checking her watch. "She needs her rest. Her brain is healing." But it wasn't healing. It was shutting down. Beatrice started sleeping 18 hours a day. When she was awake, she wasn't my bee anymore. She was a ghost. She would sit up in bed, her eyes unfocused, tracking invisible flies in the air. Her speech was slurred, a thick mumble that made no sense. On the afternoon of the 28th, I managed to slip into the room while Tiffany was in the shower. Beatrice was staring at her hands. "B," I whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It is me. It is Harry." She looked at me slowly, her brow furrowed. There was no recognition in her eyes, just a vacant, terrifying emptiness. "Who?" she croaked. "Where is the man with the ledger?" "There is no man with a ledger, B. It is your husband." She shook her head, agitated. "No. No husband. He said the husband is gone. He said I have to sign." My blood ran cold. She wasn't just forgetting. She was being programmed. Someone was talking to her while she was in this twilight state. I heard the shower turn off down the hall. I squeezed her hand once, then quickly left the room before Tiffany could catch me. That night, the house was quiet. Preston was in the study making frantic phone calls. I could hear his muffled voice through the door, sounding angry and desperate. Tiffany was in the kitchen making tea. I knew this was my chance. I needed to know what they were giving her. The blue pill from the party was one thing, but this continuous sedation was something else. I walked quietly to the guest suite they had commandeered. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room smelled of Tiffany's cloying perfume and something else, something chemical. I went straight to the bathroom. I knew Tiffany. She was arrogant. She was sloppy because she thought she was smarter than everyone else. She wouldn't hide things well because she didn't think I was a threat. The trash can next to the toilet was full of tissues and cotton balls. I dug through it, ignoring the revulsion. Near the bottom, I found it. It was a small, crushed cardboard box. The shipping label was still attached. It was from a pharmacy in Tijuana, Mexico. The name on the label was not Preston or Tiffany. It was a fake name, Jane Smith. I carefully unfolded the box. The text was in Spanish, but I recognized the chemical name, scopolamine. I froze. I knew what that was. I had read about it. They called it devil's breath in South America. It wasn't just a sedative. In high doses, it rendered the victim docile, suggestible, and wiped their memory. It was a drug used by criminals to rob victims who would willingly hand over their wallets and then forget it ever happened. They weren't treating her dementia. They were chemically lobotomizing her to make her sign the papers. I folded the box and shoved it deep into my pocket. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a rage so hot I thought it might burn the house down. They were erasing my wife. They were deleting the woman I loved to get to her bank account. I slipped out of the room and headed back toward the stairs. But I wasn't fast enough. Preston was waiting for me at the bottom of the landing. He was leaning against the banister holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed, but his expression was hard. "Snooping, Dad?" he asked, taking a sip of the drink. "I was looking for a towel," I lied, my voice steady. "You two used all the clean ones." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Cut the act. I know you don't trust us. I know you think we are the bad guys here. But you are making this harder than it needs to be." He walked up 2 steps, towering over me. The smell of expensive scotch and fear rolled off him. "We are running out of time, Dad," he said, his voice dropping. "I have obligations, deadlines, and Mom is getting worse every day. You saw her. She doesn't even know who you are." "She was fine 3 days ago," I said, meeting his gaze. "Before you arrived." "She was masking it," Preston shouted, slamming his hand against the wall. "She has been hiding it for months. And now it is all coming out. She is incompetent, Dad. And frankly, so are you for letting it get this bad." He took a breath, composing himself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He slapped it against my chest. "These are the transfer documents," he said. "Full power of attorney over Mom's estate and yours. Management of the trust, the properties, everything." I looked at the envelope, then at him. "I am not signing that, Preston." He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. "You don't have a choice. Here's the deal. You sign these papers before New Year's Eve. That is 5 days. You sign them and we put Mom in the best facility money can buy. Private room, round-the-clock care. You can visit her every day. And if you don't, Preston hissed, I will file a petition with the court on January 2nd. I have the incident report from the hospital. I have Tiffany's testimony. And I will hire a doctor who will testify that you are neglecting her. I will prove that you are both senile. I will get the guardianship anyway, Dad. But if we do it the hard way, the court will put Mom in a state-run facility, and they will deem you unfit to live alone. You will end up in a shared room in a nursing home smelling of urine and bleach, and you will never see your money or your wife again." He stepped back, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It is a simple calculation, Dad. You like math. Do the math. Lose the money and keep your dignity or lose everything. You have until midnight on the 31st. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing on the stairs with the envelope in my hand and the empty box of poison in my pocket. He thought he had given me an ultimatum. He thought he had checkmated me, but he didn't know I had the box. And he didn't know that Harold Foster, the structural engineer, had just found the crack in the foundation that was going to bring his whole world crashing down. 5 days. I had 5 days to save my wife and destroy my son. It was more than enough time. The night of December 27th settled over the house like a heavy wool blanket. It was quiet, the kind of silence that usually brought me peace, but tonight, it felt like the calm before a structural failure. I knew I had to make my move, but first I had to clear the board. I needed them out of the house. I waited until 7 o'clock. I heard them moving around in the guest suite, the heavy thud of footsteps and the zip of zippers. They were getting dressed. They were restless. Cabin fever was setting in, and I knew that bored predators were dangerous predators. I needed to give them a distraction. I walked into the living room, curving my spine into a question mark. I dragged my left leg, slightly adding a shuffle to my step that wasn't there yesterday. I let out a low, ragged groan as I lowered myself onto the sofa, clutching my lower back with a trembling hand. Preston walked in, adjusting the cuffs of a shirt that I knew cost $300. He looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and disgust. "What is wrong with you now, Dad?" he asked, not bothering to hide the irritation in his voice. "My back," I wheezed, keeping my eyes half closed. "The stress, sleeping in the chair, it is locking up on me. I do not think I can cook tonight." I barely made it down the stairs. Tiffany emerged from the hallway, applying a fresh coat of lip gloss. She looked at me like I was a stain on the rug. "Well, we are certainly not cooking," she said. "The kitchen is a mess, and I am not your maid." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. My hands shook, a calculated tremor I had been practicing in the mirror. I pulled out my black American Express card, the heavy metal kind, the kind with a limit high enough to buy a small car. "Why don't you two go out?" I suggested, my voice weak. "Go to that steakhouse downtown. Gibson's. You deserve a break. You have been working so hard taking care of your mother. Put it on me, just bring me back some soup. Preston's eyes locked onto the card. The greed was instantaneous, overriding his suspicion. He walked over and snatched it from my hand before I could change my mind. Yeah, he said, a smile breaking through his stony expression. That is a good idea. We do need to decompress. We will be back in 2 hours. Do not wait up. Tiffany grabbed her coat, already checking her phone for reservations. Don't touch anything in the medical station, Harold. And don't give Bea any water. She is on a fluid restriction. I nodded, closing my eyes as if the effort of speaking was too much. The moment the front door clicked shut and the sound of their rental car faded down the driveway, I stood up. The slouch vanished. The tremor disappeared. I walked to the window and watched their taillights disappear around the bend. I had 2 hours. I pulled my burner phone from the hollowed-out book in my library. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Jack, I said, when the line connected. It is Harold. I need a rush job. Tonight, triple pay. Jack didn't ask questions. He was a former crime scene investigator who now ran a private security firm. He knew that when I called, the building was already on fire. He arrived 20 minutes later through the back service entrance carrying a toolbox that looked like a plumber's kit. He worked with the efficiency of a surgeon. We did not speak much. I pointed to the locations. The living room overlooking the makeshift medical station, the kitchen covering the table where they drank their coffee, and most importantly, the hallway outside the master bedroom. I want the smoke detectors swapped, I told him, and the outlets. I need audio and video, high definition, cloud storage only, no local SD cards they can find. Done, Jack said, popping the cover off the smoke detector in the hallway. These have 48 hours of battery backup and run on the house current. They will see everything. While Jack worked, I moved to phase 2. I needed to know the why. I knew they were greedy, but the desperation Preston showed at the hospital, the sheer panic in his eyes, told me there was a clock ticking that I couldn't see. I went into the guest suite. The air was thick with the smell of hairspray and stale ambition. I put on a pair of latex gloves from my workshop. I could not leave fingerprints. I started with the obvious places. The nightstand, the dresser. Nothing but clothes and cheap jewelry. Preston was sloppy, but he wasn't stupid enough to leave incriminating documents on the bedside table. I looked at the closet. His suitcase was shoved in the back under a pile of dirty laundry. It was a high-end leather bag, scuffed and worn. I pulled it out. It was locked with a 3-digit combination. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried Tiffany's birthday. Nothing. Then I tried the day he graduated from college, the day he thought he became better than me. Click. I opened the bag. Underneath a stack of silk ties, I found it. It was a black ledger, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $5. It looked out of place among his designer gear. I opened it. It wasn't a business journal. It was a record of ruin. The pages were filled with scribbles, dates, and numbers. But these weren't profits. They were losses. Massive losses. Crypto crash negative 200,000. Sports book negative 50,000. Vegas line negative 100,000. I flipped to the last page. The date was from 2 weeks ago. The handwriting was jagged, pressed hard into the paper. Consolidated debt, $4.5 million. Due date December 31st. Creditor Vinny. My stomach turned over. Vinny. That wasn't a bank. That wasn't a credit card company. You don't owe Vinny $4 million and get a late fee. You get a bullet. I flipped back a page. There were notes in the margin. Option A, refinance house. Denied. Option B, Dad's liquid assets. Option C, the trust. He had circled option C 3 times. The ink had bled through the paper. This wasn't just greed. This was survival. He had gambled away everything he had and everything he didn't have. He had borrowed money from sharks, and now the sharks were circling. He needed $18 million not to get rich, but to stay alive. And he was willing to sacrifice his mother to do it. I took photos of every page with my burner phone. I put the ledger back exactly as I found it, making sure the silk ties were folded in the same messy way. I locked the suitcase and shoved it back under the laundry. I checked my watch. They had been gone for 90 minutes. Jack was already packing up in the kitchen. "We are live," Jack whispered as I walked in. "You can access the feed from the app I installed on your secure tablet. It is encrypted." "Go," I said, handing him a thick envelope of cash. "Out the back." I sat back down on the sofa, assuming the position of the frail old man. I turned on the television to a game show, keeping the volume low. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Laughter drifted in loud and slightly slurred. They had enjoyed the wine. Good. Drunk people make mistakes. They walked into the living room. Preston was holding a to-go bag. "Here is your soup, Dad," he said, dropping the bag on the coffee table. "It is probably cold." He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the bourbon decanter and poured himself a drink. Tiffany kicked off her heels and flopped onto the adjacent chair. "That was amazing," she sighed. "I needed that. It is so stressful being here." Preston took a long swallow of his drink. His phone rang. He froze. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. The relaxation from the expensive dinner evaporated instantly. "I have to take this," he muttered. He walked out of the room, heading toward the back patio door. It was freezing outside, but he didn't grab a coat. I waited a beat. Then I slowly, painfully stood up. "Bathroom," I mumbled to Tiffany, who didn't even look up from her phone. I shuffled toward the hallway, but I didn't go to the bathroom. I went to the kitchen, which shared a wall with the patio. I pressed my ear against the cold glass of the kitchen window, hidden by the heavy drapes. Preston was pacing on the patio. His voice was muffled, but in the silence of the winter night, I could hear every word. "I know, Vinny. I know what day it is." Pause. "No, listen to me. It is handled. The old man is crumbling. He is weak." Pause. "I swear on my life. The papers will be signed before the ball drops. I have them in the house. The mother she is incapacitated. She can't stop it. And the father is a coward. He will sign to keep her out of the state home." Pause. "Yes. I will have the access codes on the first. I can wire the first installment immediately. Just call off your guys, Vinny. Please, do not come to the house." He stopped pacing. His voice dropped to a whisper that chilled me more than the wind. "If you come to the house, it ruins everything. Just give me 3 days. I am going to get the signature, one way or another. The old man will sign or he will have a heart attack. I don't care which. I just need the money." I pulled back from the window. My heart was pounding a rhythm of pure adrenaline. He wasn't just waiting for me to give up. He was considering accelerating the process. "I will have a heart attack." He was talking about killing me, or scaring me to death. I shuffled back to the living room and collapsed onto the sofa just as the patio door slid open. Preston walked in. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He was shivering, his skin clammy. "Who was that son?" I asked, my voice trembling with feigned age. "Work," he snapped, pouring another drink. "Just business." "Go to sleep, Dad. You look terrible." I closed my eyes. "You have no idea, son," I thought. "I know about the ledger. I know about Vinny. And I know you just threatened my life." The cameras were rolling. The trap was set. But now I knew the stakes. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was a race against the clock to see who would strike first before New Year's Eve. And I had no intention of losing. The morning of December 28th brought a silence to the house that felt suffocating. I locked the heavy oak door of my study and sat behind the desk that had belonged to my father. On the surface, I was a retired man reviewing his investments. Underneath the desk on a secure tablet propped against my knee, I was a surveillance operator watching the dismantling of my wife's soul. Jack's cameras were high definition. The feed from the master bedroom was crystal clear, displayed in grayscale on the screen. I saw Beatrice lying in bed, a small mound under the heavy duvet. She looked so fragile, so diminished. It broke my heart to see her like that, but I forced myself to watch. An engineer cannot fix a problem he refuses to look at. At 9:15, the door to the bedroom opened. Tiffany walked in. She wasn't wearing her white scrubs today. She was wearing yoga pants and a tight t-shirt, looking fresh and energetic, a stark contrast to the woman she was tormenting. She carried a tray with a glass of water and a small cup. I leaned in closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat. She set the tray on the nightstand. Beatrice stirred but didn't wake up. Tiffany stood over her for a moment, hands on her hips, impatience radiating from her posture. Then she did something that made my blood freeze in my veins. She didn't gently shake Beatrice's shoulder. She didn't call her name softly. She reached out and slapped Beatrice's cheek. It wasn't a violent bruising blow, but it was sharp, disrespectful. A slap meant to sting, to shock. "Wake up, Beatrice," Tiffany said. The audio from the smoke detector was crisp. I could hear the rustle of the sheets as my wife jerked awake, gasping. Beatrice looked around wildly, her eyes wide with fear. "Who? What is it?" "It is time for your medicine," Tiffany said, her voice dropping to a low, sinister whisper. But she didn't pick up the pill cup. She leaned down, bringing her face inches from Beatrice's. "You know why you are so tired, don't you, Bea?" Beatrice shook her head weakly. I don't know. I feel sick." "You are sick because you are useless," Tiffany hissed. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard the wood creaked. I wanted to run up those stairs and throw her out the window, but I stayed. I needed this. I needed the jury to see this. "You are a burden." Tiffany continued, her words dripping like acid. "Harold is sick of you. He told us last night at dinner. He said he wishes you would just go to sleep and never wake up so he can spend his money on a new wife, a younger wife." "No." Beatrice whimpered, tears leaking from her eyes. "Harry wouldn't. He loves me." "He hates you," Tiffany lied, smiling a cruel, thin smile. "He is disgusted by you. You wet the bed. You forget his name. You are rotting from the inside out, Beatrice. The only way to make him happy again is to sign the papers Preston gives you. Sign them, and then you can go to the special hospital where you won't bother anyone anymore." Beatrice began to sob, a low, keen sound of pure misery. "I want to die," she whispered. "That is the best idea you have had all week," Tiffany said. She picked up the glass of water. "Drink this. It will help you sleep. It will make the bad thoughts go away." Beatrice drank it obediently, like a frightened child. Tiffany didn't give her any pills. She just gave her the water. She smoothed the blanket, patted Beatrice's head with a mocking tenderness, and walked out of the room, leaving my wife crying alone in the dark. I sat back in my chair, trembling uncontrollably. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. This wasn't Alzheimer's. This wasn't dementia. My wife wasn't losing her mind. She was being systematically broken. They were gaslighting her, rewriting her reality, making her believe she was unloved and unwanted so she would sign away her life. It was psychological torture, executed with the cold precision of a sociopath. I wiped my face with my handkerchief. I couldn't afford to break down. Not now. I had to be the steel beam that held this house together. My phone buzzed on the desk, jarring me from my rage. It was an email notification. The subject line read, "Toxicology Report, Sample A." 2 days ago, before they fully took over, I had managed to siphon a few ounces of the special tea Tiffany brewed for Beatrice into a sterile vial I kept for water testing. I had sent it to a private lab in the city, paying extra for a rush job. I opened the email. I scanned past the chemical composition breakdown looking for the summary. Detected substance scopolamine hyoscine hydrobromide. Concentration high. Notes: psychoactive alkaloid. Effects include tachycardia, dry mouth, amnesia, and high susceptibility to suggestion. In large doses, it suppresses free will. I dropped the phone. The box in the trash hadn't been a fluke. They were actively dosing her. Scopolamine, the devil's breath. It was a drug that turned people into zombies. It stripped away their ability to say no. It made them docile puppets who would empty their bank accounts and hand over the keys to their lives only to wake up later with no memory of the event. The memory loss, the confusion, the lethargy. It all made sense. They were keeping her in a chemical fog, malleable and weak, waiting for the moment they put the pen in her hand. I looked back at the screen. Beatrice had fallen back asleep, the drug taking hold again. They weren't just greedy children waiting for an inheritance. They were monsters. They were chemically assaulting an elderly woman, their own mother and mother-in-law. I saved the video file to 3 different cloud servers. I printed the toxicology report. I opened the safe in the floor of my study and placed the hard copy inside next to my will and my revolver. I had the video. I had the lab results. I had the motive in Preston's ledger. I had the weapon in the trash can. The puzzle was complete. I had enough evidence to send them to prison for 20 years. But sending them to prison wasn't enough. Not yet. They wanted a signature on New Year's Eve. They wanted a grand finale. I looked at the calendar on my desk, December 28th. 3 days left. I would give them their finale. But the script was about to change. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to let them think they had won, let them walk right up to the finish line, and then I was going to drop the floor out from under them. I picked up the phone and dialed the lab. "This is Harold Foster," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "Thank you for the report. I need one more favor. Do you have any vitamin B1 powder?" "Yes. Thiamine. I need a lot of it. And I need it to look exactly like the white powder in the sample I sent you." I hung up. Tiffany was a pharmacist. She thought she knew everything about drugs, but she forgot the most important rule of engineering. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. She had been feeding my wife poison. Starting tonight, I was going to feed her hope. I was going to swap their weapon for a placebo, and I was going to whoosh as my wife woke up from her nightmare right in front of their eyes. And when she did, she would be the one to deliver the final blow. The morning of December 29th was crisp and bright, a deceptive mask for the rot festering inside my home. I told Tiffany I was going to the pharmacy to pick up my own blood pressure medication. She eyed me suspiciously, checking the time on the microwave, but she let me go. She probably figured an old man running an errand was harmless. Or maybe she just wanted an hour alone to torment my wife without an audience. I didn't go to the pharmacy. I drove 3 towns over to a nondescript office park in Oak Brook. This was the office of Alan Sterling, a lawyer I had kept on retainer for 30 years, a man who knew where all the bodies were buried, because he had helped dig the holes for half the city's elite. Jack, my private investigator, was already there, pacing the conference room like a caged tiger. The table was covered in photographs and financial printouts. It looked like a war room, and in a way it was. Alan didn't waste time with pleasantries. He poured me a cup of coffee and nodded at Jack. "Tell him." Jack slid a thick manila folder across the mahogany table. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. "Your son is not a businessman, Harold." Jack said, his voice flat and professional. "He is a hemorrhaging wound of bad decisions. We ran the audit on his so-called startup CryptoNext. It is a shell. It has no employees, no product, and no revenue. The only thing it has is a transaction history that looks like a suicide note. I opened the folder. My engineer's eyes scanned the data rows. It was a catastrophic structural failure of finance. He started gambling 3 years ago. Jack continued, pointing to a graph that looked like a jagged cliff. Online poker at first, then sports betting. Then he got into high-leverage crypto trading. He leveraged everything he had, and then he leveraged things he didn't have. I turned the page. There were photos of Preston entering a pawn shop, photos of him meeting a man in a parked car in a dark alley. "Who is the man?" I asked, tapping the photo. "That is an associate of Vincent Vinny Moretti," Jack said grimly. "Vinny is not a banker, Harold. He is the kind of loan shark the mob goes to when they need liquid assets. He charges 10% interest a week, and he doesn't collect with late notices. He collects with a tire iron." Alan leaned forward, clasping his hands. "We confirmed the ledger you found, Harold. The debt is real, $4.5 million, and Vinny has given him a hard deadline. December 31st, New Year's Eve." The pieces of the puzzle clicked together with the terrifying precision of a steel trap. The urgency, the desperation at the hospital, the drugs. They weren't just trying to get rich. They were trying to stay alive. Preston had gambled his life away, and now he was trying to trade his mother's life to buy it back. "If he doesn't pay by midnight on the 31st, Jack said, Vinny will kill him. It is not a threat. It is a business model. Vinny has to make an example of him. And $18 million would cover the debt and leave them with a fortune to disappear with," I murmured, staring at the photo of my son shaking hands with a thug. "Exactly," Alan said. "They need to liquidate Beatrice's commercial holdings immediately. That is why they need the emergency guardianship. With that power of attorney, they can take a bridge loan against the properties within 24 hours. They can pay Vinny and flee the country before anyone realizes the estate has been gutted." I sat back, feeling a cold numbness spread through my chest. My son was a dead man walking, and he had decided that the only way to save himself was to mentally murder his mother. "What is the legal standing?" I asked Alan. "With the evidence you have," Alan said, tapping the toxicology report I had sent him, "we can crush them. We can get an emergency protective order. We can have them arrested today." "No," I said sharply. "Not today." Harold, Alan warned, "this is dangerous. These people are desperate. If we arrest them today," I explained, "Preston claims he has a gambling problem. He pleads out. He gets a slap on the wrist. And Tiffany, she claims she was a dutiful wife following her husband's orders. She walks away. And my wife stays broken, traumatized, believing she is losing her mind." I stood up, buttoning my coat. "I need them to commit. I need them to stand in front of witnesses and present the fraudulent documents. I need them to attempt the theft. Then and only then do we drop the hammer. I want them gone for 20 years, Alan. Not 2. I left the office with a copy of the dossier tucked inside my coat. The drive back to the house felt like driving into a war zone. I was returning to a home occupied by enemy combatants. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something. The curtain in the guest room window moved. Just a flicker. Someone was watching. I entered the house, making sure to stomp the snow off my boots loudly. I wanted them to know I was back. I walked into the kitchen and placed the pharmacy bag on the counter. Inside was a bottle of high blood pressure pills I didn't need, and a receipt to prove my alibi. Tiffany was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. "Did you get your pills?" she asked, her voice bored. "Yes," I said. "How is Bea?" "Sleeping," she replied. She was agitated earlier. I had to give her something to calm her down. My hand clenched in my pocket, crumpling the receipt. I knew what that something was. More poison. But tonight that would change. Tonight the swap would happen. I walked toward the stairs, intending to go to my study to check the cameras. As I passed the guest suite, the door was open. I glanced inside. My heart skipped a beat. The chair, the small velvet chair in the corner where I had sat to photograph the ledger. I had moved it back. I was sure I had moved it back. But now it was turned, just slightly, facing the closet instead of the window. And right in the center of the seat cushion was a single latex glove. My latex glove. The one I had shoved into my pocket after handling the ledger. It must have fallen out when I crouched down. I froze. Behind me I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor. Looking for something, Harold. I turned around slowly. Tiffany was standing in the hallway. She wasn't looking at her phone anymore. She was looking at me and her eyes were dark, devoid of any human warmth. She looked like a viper coiled to strike. I thought I heard a noise. I stammered, falling back into the persona of the confused old man. She took a step closer. The smell of her perfume was overpowering. You know, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. You are very spry for your age, Harold. Walking around at night, checking things that don't concern you. She walked past me into the room and picked up the latex glove. She held it up between two manicured fingers like a piece of evidence. Preston thinks you are just a senile old fool, she said, examining the glove. He thinks you are weak. But I look at you and I see a rat, a scurrying little rat sniffing around where he doesn't belong. She dropped the glove into the trash can and smiled. It was a terrifying expression. You should be careful, Dad, she said, putting a mocking emphasis on the word. Old houses have steep stairs. Rugs slip. Food can go bad. People your age, they have accidents all the time. It would be a shame if something happened to you before the new year. Beatrice would be all alone. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She knew. She didn't know exactly what I had found, but she knew I had been in her room. She knew I was a threat. And she had just told me in no uncertain terms that murder was on the table. I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to tremble visibly. I am just going to check on B, I whispered, backing away. You do that, Tiffany said, turning her back to me to adjust her hair in the mirror. Say goodbye to her for me. I hurried up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. The game had changed. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a physical one. They were desperate, they were cornered, and now they were hunting me. I locked myself in my study and leaned against the heavy wood, gasping for air. I looked at the safe where the evidence was hidden. I looked at the calendar. 2 days. I just had to survive 2 more days. I checked the monitor. Beatrice was sleeping. Her chest rising and falling in a shallow rhythm. Tonight, I thought. Tonight, I swap the drugs. Tonight, I wake her up. Because if I am going to have an accident, I need a witness. And I need an ally. The engineer in me calculated the odds. The load-bearing capacity of this family was gone. We were in freefall. And the only thing left to do was to guide the collapse so it landed squarely on their heads. The dinner on the 29th was a masterclass in tension. Tiffany had ordered Chinese takeout, dumping it onto paper plates with the grace of a prison warden feeding inmates. We sat in the formal dining room, the crystal chandelier dim, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Preston picked at his kung pao chicken, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Tiffany ate with aggressive precision, her eyes darting between me and the hallway leading to the guest room. She knew I knew something, but she didn't know how much. That uncertainty was making her edgy. I lifted my spoon, my hand trembling violently. It wasn't entirely acting. The adrenaline pumping through my 70-year-old veins was real. I brought the wonton soup to my lips, then let my wrist spasm. The spoon clattered against the bowl, sending hot broth splashing onto the tablecloth and down the front of my cardigan. Oh, for God's sake, Tiffany snapped, throwing her napkin down. Can you not eat like a toddler for 5 minutes? I stared at the stain spreading on my chest, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. I didn't wipe it off. I just let it soak in a visible symbol of my decline. I am sorry, I whispered, my voice cracking. I am so sorry. My hands, they just don't work like they used to. My mind doesn't work. Preston looked up, his annoyance softening into a predatory interest. What do you mean, Dad? I looked at him, letting tears well up in my eyes. I can't do this anymore, son. I tried. I tried to hold it all together for your mother. But look at me. I am spilling soup on myself. I am forgetting things. I am tired, Preston. So tired. I took a shaky breath, looking from him to Tiffany. Maybe you were right, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Maybe I am not fit to manage this. Maybe B needs more help than I can give. I think I am ready to sign the papers. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Preston and Tiffany exchanged a glance. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. The prey had finally stopped running. The trap had worked. Are you serious, Dad? Preston asked, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice and failing. Yes. I sighed, picking at the tablecloth. I just want peace. I want B to be safe. If you can promise me she will be taken care of, that she won't be sent to some state home, then I will sign. We promise, Tiffany said quickly, her voice suddenly sweet again. We will find her the best place, Harold, a beautiful facility, and we will take care of everything else. You won't have to worry about bills or maintenance or anything. You can just rest. Rest. That was code for die quietly in a corner while we spend your money. Let's do it on New Year's Eve, Preston said, pulling out his phone. I will call the lawyer. We can have everything ready, a fresh start for the new year. Yes, I nodded. A fresh start. After dinner, the atmosphere in the house changed. The hostility evaporated, replaced by a smug, relaxed confidence. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was broken. They poured themselves drinks and went into the living room to watch TV, laughing at a sitcom, already spending the money in their heads. This was exactly what I needed. Arrogance is a blindfold. I waited until 2 a.m. I watched the monitors in my study until I saw the lights go out in the guest suite. I waited another hour to be sure. Then I moved. I didn't need to limp anymore. I moved through the dark house with the silent precision of a ghost. I went to the kitchen first. I took the bottle of vitamin B1 powder I had prepared. I had spent hours grinding the tablets into a fine dust that matched the consistency of the scopolamine perfectly. I crept up the stairs. The door to the guest suite was closed but not locked. They were so confident now, so sure of their victory, they didn't feel the need to secure their perimeter. I eased the door open. The room was dark, lit only by the street lamp outside. I could hear Preston's heavy snoring and Tiffany's soft breathing. I moved toward the makeshift medical station on the dresser where Tiffany kept her special supply. There it was, the unmarked glass vial next to her jewelry box. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. This was the most dangerous part. If she woke up, if she saw me, the game was over. I unscrewed the cap of the vial. I dumped the scopolamine powder into a plastic baggie I had brought with me. Then I poured the vitamin B1 powder into the vial. It looked identical. White, fine, odorless. I screwed the cap back on and wiped the vial with my shirt to remove any fingerprints. I slipped the baggie of scopolamine into my pocket. I was about to leave when I saw it. Her phone on the nightstand. It lit up with a notification. A text message. Vinny says 2 days. Don't miss. I stared at the glowing screen. The timer was ticking down. They were under as much pressure as I was. That was good. Pressure makes people make mistakes. I slipped out of the room and closed the door silently. Phase 1 complete. Now for Phase 2. I went into the master bedroom. Beatrice was awake. She was sitting up in bed, rocking back and forth, muttering to herself. The withdrawal from the drug was starting to kick in, or maybe the last dose was wearing off. "B," I whispered, locking the door behind me. She looked at me. Her eyes were still foggy, but there was a flicker of recognition that hadn't been there yesterday. "Harry," she croaked. The man said you left." "I am here, B. I never left." I sat beside her and took her hands. They were cold. "Listen to me," I said, my voice urgent. "You have been sick. They have been giving you bad medicine. But I stopped it. Do you understand? I swapped the medicine." She blinked, processing the words slowly. "Bad medicine." "Yes. Tomorrow when you wake up, your head is going to feel clearer. You are going to remember things. You are going to remember who you are." She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I thought I was crazy, Harry. I thought I lost my mind." "You are not crazy," I said fiercely. "You are being poisoned." "But it stops now." I squeezed her hands. "But B, this is the most important part. You cannot let them know. You have to pretend." "Pretend?" she asked. "You have to pretend you are still confused. You have to pretend you don't know me. You have to pretend you are the woman they think you are." "Can you do that?" Why, she whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. "Because if they know you are getting better, they will hurt us," I said honestly. "They need you to be sick so they can take the money. We have to wait until the party. Until New Year's Eve. Then we trap them." She looked at me, searching my face. She saw the fear, the determination. And slowly, the old Beatrice, the strong woman who had raised a family and managed a real estate empire, began to surface. She straightened her spine. She took a deep breath. "Okay, Harry," she said, her voice stronger. "I can act. I was the lead in the high school play, remember?" I smiled, kissing her forehead. "I remember. You were wonderful." "Get some sleep," she said. "You look tired." "I am not tired." I lied. "I am just getting started." I left the room, unlocking the door so Tiffany wouldn't suspect anything. I went back to my study and sat in the dark, watching the monitors. The next 24 hours were going to be a performance. A deadly play where a single missed line could cost us our lives. I checked the safe again. The evidence was there. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the curtain to rise and pray that when it did, the villains would be the only ones left standing on the trapdoor. The morning of December 30th arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The atmosphere inside the house was brittle, like dry twigs ready to snap under the slightest pressure. I sat in my study, ostensibly reviewing old photo albums, but in reality I was glued to the monitor. Beatrice was in bed. She was awake. I could tell by the way her hands moved under the covers, flexing and gripping, testing her returning strength. The vitamin B1 was working. The fog was lifting. But she lay still, her eyes half closed, playing the part of the vacant invalid perfectly. Tiffany entered the room at 10 o'clock. She was vibrating with nervous energy. Her movements were jerky and aggressive. She was carrying the special tea. I watched on the screen as she mixed a double dose of the white powder into the cup. She stirred it violently, the spoon clinking against the porcelain like a warning bell. She didn't know she was giving my wife a massive boost of energy and cognitive function. She thought she was delivering the final knockout blow. She marched to the bedside. "Sit up, Beatrice," she commanded. Beatrice groaned, feigning confusion. She let her head loll to the side. Who is there?" "It is Tiffany, you old bat," she muttered, shoving a pillow behind Beatrice's back. "Drink this. All of it." Beatrice took the cup with trembling hands. She spilled a little on her chin, a nice touch of acting. She drank it down. Tiffany watched her like a hawk, waiting for the glaze to come over her eyes, waiting for the slump of unconsciousness. But it didn't happen. Not the way Tiffany expected. The vitamin B1 was doing the opposite. It was firing up Beatrice's synapses. Her eyes, usually dull from the scopolamine, were clear and sharp, even as she tried to keep them unfocused. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Tiffany hissed after 5 minutes. She paced the room. "You should be out." "Why are you fighting it?" She grabbed Beatrice's arm. She dug her manicured nails into the soft flesh of my wife's bicep. It wasn't a check for responsiveness. It was a pinch, a vicious, cruel twist of the skin meant to inflict pain. Beatrice cried out. It was a sharp, genuine yelp of pain. "Stop! That hurts!" Tiffany didn't let go. She leaned in, her face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "Then sign the papers, Beatrice. Just sign them and the pain stops. Sign them and you can sleep forever." I slammed my fist onto my desk. That was enough. I unlocked my study door and shuffled down the hall as fast as my fake limp would allow. I banged the cane against the floorboards to announce my arrival. "What is going on in here?" I shouted, pushing open the bedroom door. I heard screaming. Tiffany jumped back as if she had been burned. She smoothed her shirt, composing herself instantly. Beatrice was clutching her arm, whimpering. She fell out of bed. Harold, Tiffany lied, her voice breathless. "I was trying to help her up. She is so confused. She thought I was hurting her." I walked over to Beatrice. I saw the red crescents on her arm where Tiffany's nails had dug in. I looked at my wife. Her eyes met mine. Behind the veil of tears, I saw a flash of steel. She gave me a microscopic nod. She was okay. She was holding the line. "She needs rest," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Get out, Tiffany. Let her sleep." "Fine," Tiffany spat. "Watch her yourself then. She is impossible today." She stormed out, leaving a trail of frustration in her wake. I waited until her footsteps faded down the stairs. I kissed Beatrice's bruise. "Hold on, Ba," I whispered. "Just one more day. You are doing perfectly." I went downstairs. I found Preston in the kitchen. He was pacing, chewing on his cuticles. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he reeked of stale sweat and fear. The deadline was tomorrow. Vinny was waiting. He saw me and stopped pacing. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a blue folder. "Dad, sit down," he said. "We need to finish this. Today." I sat at the kitchen table, letting my hands rest heavily on the wood. I looked at the folder. The transfer of assets and guardianship agreement. "Read it," Preston said, sliding it across the table. "It is standard stuff. It just gives me the authority to manage the properties and make medical decisions. It protects you." I put on my reading glasses. I opened the document. I scanned the legalese. It was a complete surrender. It gave him power to sell, mortgage, and liquidate everything. But then on page 12, paragraph 4, I saw it. The clause that made my stomach churn. "Upon execution of this agreement, the wards," that was us, "shall be placed in a residential care facility deemed appropriate by the guardian, with costs not to exceed $2,000 per month." $2,000. I looked up at him. $2,000 a month, Preston. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "It is just a baseline, Dad. We can always pay more. But we have to be conservative with the estate until we liquidate the commercial assets. $2,000 a month does not get you a private room. It does not get you round-the-clock care. It gets you a cot in a state-subsidized warehouse where they strap you to the bed so they don't have to hire enough nurses. It gets you neglect. It gets you a slow, lonely death in a room that smells of urine." He was planning to warehouse us. He was going to take our $18 million, pay off his shark, and throw us into the garbage. This seems extreme, son," I said, my voice trembling. "A facility. I thought we could stay here." Preston slammed his hand on the table. "We went over this. It's dangerous. She tried to poison Tiffany. You can't handle her. This is the only way." He took a breath, trying to calm himself. Look, Dad. I found a place, in Shady Pines. It is nice. They have a garden. You will be together. Just sign the papers. Please. I need to get this filed. He pushed a pen toward me. His hand was shaking. I looked at the pen. I looked at the contract. I looked at my son. If I signed now, the game was over. If I refused, he might get violent. I needed to stall. I needed to move the pieces to the final square. I picked up the pen. I hovered it over the signature line. Preston stopped breathing. He leaned in, his eyes hungry. Then I dropped the pen. I can't, I whispered. What? Preston shouted. What do you mean you can't? Not like this, I said, looking up at him with watery eyes. Not in the kitchen. Not with grease stains on the table. This is our life, Preston. This is everything I worked for. So what? He demanded. I want to do it right, I said. Tomorrow, New Year's Eve. We always have a toast on New Year's Eve. Invite the lawyer, invite Mr. Higgins, and a notary. We will do it properly. We will have a nice dinner. We will toast to the future. And then, when the ball drops, I will sign. Preston stared at me. He was calculating. Tomorrow was the 31st, the deadline. It was cutting it close. Too close. Dad, I don't know, he started. It is my condition, Preston, I said firmly, channeling just a hint of my old authority. I want witnesses. I want it to be dignified. I am handing over my life to you. Allow me to do it with some grace. He looked at the clock. He looked at his phone. He was terrified, but he also saw an old man clinging to his last shred of pride. He figured he could manage Vinny for 24 more hours. Fine, he spat. Tomorrow night. But no tricks, Dad. You sign at 10 p.m. That gives me 2 hours to fax the confirmation to the bank. To Vinny, I thought. I agreed, I said. 10 p.m. He snatched the papers back and stormed out of the kitchen. I stayed at the table listening to my own heartbeat. It was done. The trap was set. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. The winter sun went down early, plunging the house into darkness. I retreated to my study, checking the cameras, checking the safe. Everything was ready. At 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a long, insistent press. I heard Preston running down the stairs. I checked the monitor for the front porch. There was no one there. Just a box. A cardboard box sitting on the welcome mat. It was wet at the bottom. I heard the front door open. I heard Preston step outside. Then I heard a scream. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a scream of primal, abject terror. It was the sound a man makes when he sees his own death staring back at him. I hurried to the landing, peering over the banister. Preston was scrambling backward into the hallway, crab-walking on his hands and feet. He was hyperventilating. In the open doorway, illuminated by the porch light, sat the box. Preston had kicked the lid off. Inside was a pig's head, severed. Its eyes were open, staring blankly. Blood was pooling in the bottom of the box, leaking onto my pristine porch. Stuffed into the pig's mouth was a roll of cash, burned and blackened, and a note. I didn't need to read the note to know what it said. It was a message from Vinny. Time is up. Next time it is your head. Preston slammed the door shut and locked it. He leaned against the wood, sliding down until he hit the floor. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob. He was shaking violently. Oh God, he moaned. Oh God, he is going to kill me. He is really going to kill me. Tiffany came running down the stairs. She saw Preston on the floor. She saw the blood on his hands where he had touched the box. What is it? She shrieked. What happened? Preston looked up at her. His face was gray. "He was here," he whispered. "Vinny. He left a head. A pig's head." Tiffany put a hand over her mouth, stifling a scream. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching them unravel. The fear in the room was palpable. It smelled like copper and sweat. They were broken. They were terrified. And tomorrow night, they would walk into my party thinking they were signing a contract that would save their livos. But they were wrong. They were walking into an execution, and I was the one holding the axe. New Year's Eve usually smells like champagne and hope, but inside my house on December 31st, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and moral decay. The living room, usually a place of warmth where Beatrice and I would watch the ball drop on television with a quiet toast, had been transformed into a stage. Preston had spared no expense using my credit card, of course. There were platters of caviar that no one was eating, and bottles of vintage Dom Perignon sweating in silver buckets. But there was no music. There was no laughter. The atmosphere was as brittle as old parchment. I sat in my wingback chair wearing my best suit, my hands folded over the head of my cane. I watched them assemble. It was a firing squad disguised as a holiday party. Preston was vibrating. He was wearing a tuxedo that looked like it was strangling him. He kept wiping his palms on his trousers, his eyes darting to the front door every time the wind rattled the frame. He was terrified that Vinny might decide not to wait until midnight. He needed this signature like a drowning man needs air. Then there were the guests. Not friends. Not family. Accomplices. Mr. Higgins, the family lawyer who had served my father, sat on the sofa. He had grown fat and corrupt over the years. His eyes were small and greedy, buried in a face that looked like melting dough. He was shuffling papers on the coffee table, arranging the contract that would strip me of my dignity. Next to him was a notary, public, a nervous little man with a stamp who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And in the corner, sipping my scotch, was Dr. Thorne. He was a psychiatrist Preston had found. He was there to certify that Beatrice and I were mentally incompetent to give a medical stamp of approval to this hijacking. He didn't look at me. He just looked at the expensive art on the walls, probably calculating his fee. I looked toward the kitchen. Tiffany was there. She was humming. She wore a gold sequined dress that caught the light, shimmering like a reptile's scales. She looked radiant. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over, and she was just waiting for the prize ceremony. She was preparing the final cup of tea for Beatrice. I watched her through the open archway. She reached into her purse and pulled out the vial I had tampered with. She dumped a generous amount of the white powder into the steaming cup. She stirred it with a silver spoon, her movements graceful and confident. She thought she was giving my wife a massive dose of scopolamine to make her docile for the signing. She didn't know she was giving her a high dose of thiamine, a vitamin that boosts energy and cognitive function. She walked into the living room, the cup rattling slightly on the saucer. "Here you go, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Drink this. It will help you get through the night." Beatrice was sitting on the love seat. She looked small and frail, her head bowed. She was playing her part perfectly. She took the cup with a shaking hand. "Thank you, dear." Beatrice whispered, her voice weak. "Drink it all," Tiffany urged, standing over her like a warden. "We have a big night ahead." I watched Beatrice sip the tea. I held my breath. This was the tipping point. If she broke character, if she showed even a spark of the strength returning to her body, they would know. But Beatrice just slumped further into the cushions, letting her eyelids flutter. She finished the tea and handed the cup back to Tiffany. "Good girl," Tiffany said, patting her hand patronizingly. I looked away, scanning the room for the final piece of my puzzle. There was a waiter moving through the room, collecting empty glasses and refilling water. He was wearing a black vest and a white shirt, his face obscured by thick glasses, and a sterile mask, which wasn't uncommon these days. He moved with a quiet efficiency that made him invisible to people like Preston and Tiffany. They didn't see the help. They only saw the service. I caught the waiter's eye as he passed my chair. It was Jack, my private investigator. He gave me a microscopic nod. He had done his work. The HDMI cable from my secure tablet was already snaked behind the bookshelf and connected to the 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The remote control was in his pocket. The trap was primed. The explosive was set. Now we just needed the trigger. Preston checked his watch for the 10th time in a minute. It was 10:00. All right. Preston announced, his voice too loud in the quiet room. Let's get this started. I want to have this filed and faxed before midnight. He gestured to Higgins. The lawyer cleared his throat and stood up, buttoning his jacket. He picked up the heavy document and placed it on the coffee table in front of us. He uncapped a fountain pen. It made a sound like a sword being drawn from a sheath. Harold Beatrice Higgins began his tone somber and professional, as if he were reading a eulogy. We are gathered here to ensure your future safety and well-being. As we have discussed, your declining health requires immediate intervention. He pushed the document toward me. This is the transfer of assets and guardianship agreement. Higgins continued. By signing this, you are voluntarily granting Preston full power of attorney and control over the Foster estate, including the commercial properties, the liquid assets, and your medical care decisions. Dr. Thorne has already signed the addendum certifying that this is in your best interest due to cognitive decline. I looked at Dr. Thorne. The doctor took a sip of scotch and nodded gravely. It is for the best, Harold. You need help. I looked at Preston. He was sweating profusely now. His eyes were wide, fixed on the pen. He was imagining Vinny's guys coming through the door. He was imagining the pig's head. And Tiffany. She was standing behind the sofa, her hands resting on Beatrice's shoulders. It looked like a comforting gesture, but I saw her fingers digging into the fabric of my wife's dress. She was ready to force compliance if necessary. Just sign it, Dad. Preston said, his voice tight. Let's just get it over with. The car is waiting to take you to Shady Pines. They have a bed ready for you tonight. Tonight? They weren't even going to let us sleep in our own bed one last time. They were going to ship us out the moment the ink was dry so they could pop the champagne without looking at our faces. I reached out and took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand, cold and smooth. I looked at the document. The words swam before my eyes, not because my vision was failing, but because of the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. $18 million, a lifetime of hard work, a family legacy, all being stolen with the stroke of a pen. I looked at Beatrice. She raised her head slowly. Her eyes met mine. The fog was gone. The vitamin B1 had done its job. Her eyes were clear, sharp, and blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in months. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She was ready. I looked at Preston. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at the corrupt lawyer and the paid-off doctor. I cleared my throat. Before I sign, I said, my voice low and rasping. I have one question. Preston groaned. Dad, please. No speeches. Just sign. One question, I repeated, my voice hardening. Do you really think I am this stupid? The room went dead silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Tiffany frowned, her hands freezing on Beatrice's shoulders. Higgins paused, his hand hovering over the paper. What did you say? Preston whispered. I stood up. I didn't push myself up slowly. I didn't groan. I stood up straight, my spine steel, my shoulders squared. I dropped the cane. It hit the floor with a loud clatter, but I didn't need it. I never needed it. I looked my son in the eye. I asked, if you think I am stupid, Preston, do you think I didn't notice the blue pills? Do you think I didn't see the bruises on your mother's arm? Do you think I don't know about Vinny? Preston's face went white. He stepped back, stumbling over the rug. Dad, you are confused. Dr. Thorne, tell him he is confused. I turned to the waiter. Jack. Now. Jack pulled the remote from his pocket and pointed it at the television. The screen flared to life. It wasn't the countdown to the new year. It was a video feed. High definition. Crystal clear audio. The first image was Tiffany in the kitchen 2 days ago. Her voice filled the room, sharp and hateful. Drink this, you old bat. Sign the papers and you can sleep forever. Then the screen cut to the bedroom. Tiffany pinching Beatrice. The sound of my wife crying out in pain. Then the patio. Preston pacing, talking to Vinny. I will have the access codes on the first. The old man will sign, or he will have a heart attack. I don't care which. The video played on a montage of their crimes, their cruelty, their conspiracy. Tiffany gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Higgins dropped his papers, his face turning the color of ash. Dr. Thorne choked on his scotch. But Preston. Preston just stared at the screen, watching his own voice condemn him. He watched himself trading his parents' lives for a gambling debt. The video ended on a freeze frame of Preston's face from the patio, twisted in desperation and malice. I picked up the contract from the table. I held it up for everyone to see. This isn't a contract, I said, my voice booming in the silent room. It is a confession. And you, Mr. Higgins, you just drafted a conspiracy to commit fraud. I looked at Tiffany. You are not just a bad daughter-in-law, you are a poisoner, and I have the lab results to prove it. I ripped the contract in half. The sound was loud like a gunshot. I ripped it again and again, throwing the pieces onto the floor like confetti. The party is over, I said. Preston made a sound, a strangled whimper. He looked at the door, then at me. You set us up, he stammered. Yes, I said. I did. Because unlike you, I protect this family, even from itself. Then Beatrice stood up. She didn't struggle. She rose with dignity and grace. She turned to Tiffany, who was trembling, backing away. Beatrice didn't say a word. She just looked at the woman who had tormented her, who had slapped her, who had tried to erase her mind. And then the sirens started. Faint at first, then louder, growing closer. Blue and red lights began to flash through the sheer curtains, painting the walls in the colors of judgment. I had called them 30 minutes ago. Preston ran to the window. He saw the police cruisers swarming the driveway. He saw his life ending. He turned back to me, his eyes wild. Dad, please. Vinny, if I go to jail, Vinny can't get me in jail. But if I don't pay... That is not my problem, Preston, I said coldly. You made your bet. Now you have to cover it. The front door burst open. Police officers flooded the hallway, their radios crackling. I watched as the room dissolved into chaos. But for the first time in months, I felt perfectly calm. The structure had failed just as I planned, and the rubble was landing exactly where it was supposed to. The grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime the quarter hour. It was 11:45. 15 minutes to midnight. 15 minutes until the new year. 15 minutes until my son thought he would own my life. I held the fountain pen in my hand. The ink inside was black like the intentions of the people surrounding me. Preston was practically vibrating with anticipation. He was watching the pen tip hover over the signature line like a starving dog watching a piece of meat. Just sign it, Dad. He whispered, his voice tight with a panic he was barely suppressing. Please, just sign it so we can celebrate. I looked up from the paper. I looked straight into his eyes. They were my eyes set in my wife's face, but behind them was a stranger who had sold his soul to a loan shark named Vinny. Preston, I said, my voice steady and calm, cutting through the thick tension of the room. Do you remember when you were 12 years old? I took you to the construction site of the Millennium Tower. Do you remember what I taught you about structural integrity? Preston blinked, confused by the sudden change in topic. Dad, what? Now is not the time for stories. I ignored him. I taught you that a building is only as strong as its foundation. I continued, my voice hardening. I told you that if the foundation is rotten, it does not matter how beautiful the facade is. It does not matter how expensive the paint is. If the core is weak, the whole thing will eventually collapse. I stood up slowly. I gripped the pen tight. You are the foundation of this family, Preston, and you are rotten. I raised my hand and threw the expensive fountain pen across the room. It hit the marble fireplace mantel with a sharp crack and bounced onto the floor, splattering ink across the pristine rug. Preston recoiled as if I had thrown a grenade. What are you doing? He shouted. Have you lost your mind? No, I said. I have found it. Jack. Now. The waiter in the corner. The man Preston had ignored all night pulled a remote control from his vest pocket. He pointed it at the massive 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The screen did not show the Times Square ball drop. It did not show fireworks. It flared to life with a grainy black and white image. The room went deathly silent. On the screen, a timestamp appeared, December 28th. The location was the guest suite of my own house. The image showed Tiffany. She was standing over my wife's bed. Her face was twisted into a sneer that looked demonic in the night vision. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the expensive surround sound system Preston had insisted on buying with my money. You are a burden, the Tiffany on the screen hissed. Harold is sick of you. He wishes you would just die so he can spend his money. In the living room, the real Tiffany gasped. She covered her mouth with her hands, her face draining of all color. Beatrice, sitting next to me, sat up straighter, watching her tormentor on the screen with a look of icy vindication. The video cut. New scene. The kitchen. December 27th. Preston was pacing. He was holding his phone. I know, Vinny, the recorded. Preston pleaded. I swear on my life. The papers will be signed before the ball drops. The mother is incapacitated. She can't stop it. And the father is a coward. The guests froze. Mr. Higgins, the lawyer, stopped shuffling his papers. His jaw dropped. Dr. Thorne, the psychiatrist, slowly lowered his glass of scotch, his eyes darting toward the door. They realized in that second that they were not witnessing a business transaction. They were witnessing a felony. The video cut again. This time it was Tiffany in the kitchen mixing the powder into the tea. Drink this, you old bat, the recording played. Drink it and sign the papers so you can sleep forever. Then the pièce de résistance, the audio I had captured through the kitchen window. Preston's voice clear and terrified. Just give me 3 days. I am going to get the signature. One way or another. The old man will sign or he will have a heart attack. I don't care which. I just need the money. The video froze on a close-up of Preston's face, sweat glistening on his forehead, his eyes wide with fear. The silence in the living room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at the people in the room. They were statues. Mr. Higgins was the first to move. He slowly closed the folder on the coffee table. He pushed it away from him as if it were radioactive. He looked at me, then at Preston, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He knew his career was over if this got out. Dr. Thorne stood up, his face pale. I was misled, he stammered. I was told. I did not know. Sit down, I barked. My voice was a command, the voice of a man who had commanded construction crews on skyscrapers. No one leaves. I turned to my son. Preston was staring at the TV screen. He was trembling. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just watched his own execution. "You wanted to be guardian," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You wanted to control my life. You wanted to put your mother in a state home so you could pay off a gambling debt." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the lab report. I threw it onto the coffee table on top of the unsigned contract. "Scopolamine Preston. You drugged her. You poisoned your own mother." "It wasn't me," Preston squeaked. "It was Tiffany. She is the pharmacist." Tiffany screamed. It was a raw, animalistic sound. "You coward. You begged me to do it. You said Vinny was going to cut your fingers off." She lunged at him. The perfect couple, the partners in crime, turned on each other in an instant. Tiffany clawed at his face. Preston shoved her back, knocking over a tray of crystal glasses. They shattered, the sound echoing like gunshots. "Enough," I shouted. They froze, panting, staring at me with hatred and fear. "You broke the structure," I said, looking at them, with nothing but pity. "You rotted the foundation, and now the roof is coming down on your heads." I nodded to Jack. He pressed a button on his phone. From outside, the night exploded with light. Red and blue strobes flashed through the windows, illuminating the room in a chaotic spinning rhythm. The sirens wailed, a chorus of judgment arriving at the stroke of midnight. I had called them 30 minutes ago. Preston ran to the window. He saw the fleet of police cars blocking the driveway. He saw the officers moving into position. He turned back to me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, please. You can't. Vinny will kill me in prison." I looked at him and I felt nothing. The love I had for him had been burned away, replaced by the cold, hard truth of what he was. "That is a variable you should have calculated, son," I said. The front door crashed open. SWAT officers poured into the hallway, weapons drawn. "Police, get on the ground. Now!" I sat back in my chair and took my wife's hand. She squeezed it tight. We watched as the chaos consumed the room, but we were the eye of the storm. We were still standing. The structure had held. The room descended into absolute bedlam as the police officers swarmed through the front door, their boots thudding heavy on the hardwood floor like the drumbeat of a sentencing hearing. "Police, nobody move! Hands where we can see them." The shouts echoed off the high ceilings, bouncing around the room, mixing with the wail of the sirens outside to create a symphony of catastrophe. Dr. Thorne dropped his glass, the expensive scotch soaking into the Persian rug, and threw his hands up so fast he nearly dislocated a shoulder. Higgins, the lawyer, tried to slide the incriminating contract under the sofa with his foot, a pathetic and futile attempt to hide the evidence of his conspiracy. But Tiffany was not looking at the police. She was staring at the television screen where her own voice was still playing on a loop, threatening my wife. Her eyes were wild, dilated, seeing her future disintegrate pixel by pixel. She let out a shriek that sounded less like a human and more like a wounded animal. "Turn it off!" she screamed, lunging toward the fireplace. "Turn it off! It's a lie! It's all fake!" She rushed past the coffee table, her hands clawed, reaching for the cables, reaching for anything to make the truth stop. She didn't care about the officers pointing tasers at her. She only cared about destroying the mirror that was showing her true face. She never made it to the television. Beatrice stood up. For days, my wife had played the part of the invalid. She had let herself be pinched, insulted, and treated like a piece of furniture. She had lain in that bed, listening to this woman plan her demise. But in that moment, the act was over. The fog of the drugs was gone, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of a matriarch defending her territory. Beatrice stepped into Tiffany's path. She moved with a speed and strength that shocked everyone, including me. Tiffany tried to shove past her, snarling, "Get out of my way, you old witch!" Beatrice didn't flinch. She pulled her hand back and delivered a slap that cracked through the room like a whip. It wasn't a weak, flailing hit. It was a precise, powerful strike that connected with Tiffany's cheekbones, spinning her around. Tiffany stumbled back, clutching her face, her eyes wide with shock. The room froze for a heartbeat. Even the police officers paused, stunned by the sudden violence from the elderly woman in the pearl necklace. "The tea you gave me tonight," Beatrice said, her voice ringing out clear and strong without a hint of the slur she had faked for days. "It wasn't poison, you stupid, arrogant girl. It was vitamin B1. My husband swapped your little vial 2 days ago." Tiffany stared at her, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What?" she whispered. "But I watched you drink it. I watched you fade. I was acting—" Beatrice spat, stepping closer, forcing Tiffany to retreat until her back hit the wall. "I was waiting. I was waiting for you to show the world exactly what you are. And you did not disappoint. Get on the ground now." An officer grabbed Tiffany by the shoulder and spun her around, forcing her knees to the floor. She went down, screaming, kicking her carefully curated facade of the perfect wife shattering completely. On the other side of the room, 2 officers were hauling Preston up from the floor. He was dead weight, his legs jelly, his face a mask of sheer terror. He looked at the police, then at the video still playing on the screen, and then at me. And in that moment, I saw the final, most disgusting layer of my son's character. He didn't look at his wife with concern. He didn't look at his mother with remorse. He looked for a way out. He looked for a scapegoat. "It wasn't me," Preston yelled as the officer slammed him against the wall to frisk him. "I didn't do anything. It was her. It was Tiffany." Tiffany's head snapped up, her cheek already bruising from the slap. "What did you say?" she screeched. "She's a pharmacist," Preston shouted, desperate to get the words out, desperate to sell her out to save his own skin. "She knows about the drugs. She stole the scopolamine, she mixed it. I didn't touch anything. I just wanted to help my parents manage their money. She's the one who poisoned them." The betrayal hung in the air, toxic and heavy. I watched Tiffany's face transform. The fear vanished, replaced by a rage so pure it looked like madness. She realized in that second that the man she had committed crimes for, the man she had risked her freedom for, was throwing her to the wolves without a second thought. "You coward!" Tiffany screamed, struggling against the cuffs. "You lying, spineless coward! I did it for you! I did it for your debt!" She lunged. Even with her hands cuffed behind her back, she threw herself across the few feet of space separating them. She crashed into Preston, biting at his arm, kicking at his shins. "You owe Vinny $4.5 million, she shrieked, her voice tearing at her throat. "You begged me, you cried in our bed, you said they were going to cut your fingers off. You said you'd do anything. I tried to save your pathetic life." "Shut up!" Preston yelled, trying to kick her away as the officers struggled to separate them. "She's crazy. She's a drug addict. Don't listen to her. I'm a victim here." "A victim?" Tiffany laughed, a high, hysterical sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You're a gambling addict. You bet our house, you bet your parents' lives, and now you're betting me." The officers finally dragged them apart. Preston was bleeding from a scratch on his cheek. Tiffany's dress was torn, her hair wild. They looked like animals. They looked like what they truly were underneath the designer clothes and the country club memberships. Predators turning on each other when the food ran out. "Get them out of here," the sergeant barked. "Separate cars. I don't want them killing each other before we get to the station." As they dragged Tiffany toward the door, she thrashed her purse, falling from her shoulder. It hit the floor and spilled its contents across the rug. Lipstick, credit cards, a phone, and a small, clear plastic baggie filled with jagged crystal shards. The sergeant stopped. He shined his flashlight on the bag. He put on a glove and picked it up, holding it to the light. "Well, well," the sergeant said dryly. "Crystal methamphetamine. That explains the aggression." I looked at the bag. Meth. It made sense. The erratic behavior, the paranoia, the weight loss. She wasn't just evil, she was high. She had been using stimulants to keep up with the stress of her own crimes, to keep the energy needed to torment an old woman. "That's not mine," Tiffany wailed, but the fight had gone out of her. "He planted it. Preston planted it." "Save it for the judge, lady," the officer said, hauling her up. I watched them go. Preston was weeping now, begging the officers to let him call his lawyer, begging them to protect him from Vinny. Tiffany was silent, staring at the floor, her life effectively over. They were dragged out into the cold night, into the flashing lights, leaving behind the wreckage of their greed. The room slowly quieted down. The police began to bag evidence, the teacup, the contract pieces, the drugs. Mr. Higgins and Dr. Thorne were being questioned in the corner, looking small and terrified. Their careers were over. They would be lucky to avoid prison time. I walked over to the fireplace and picked up my cane. I didn't need it for walking, but I liked the weight of it in my hand. I walked to the window and watched the squad cars pull away. Beatrice came up beside me. She slipped her hand into mine. Her grip was strong. She wasn't the frail, confused woman they had tried to create. She was my wife. She was the steel in the concrete. "They are gone, Harry," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "They are gone." I looked at the mess in the living room, the spilled wine, the shattered glass, the ink stain on the rug. It was a disaster area. But to me it looked like victory. It looked like a clean slate. "We have a lot of cleaning up to do," I said. "We have time," she replied. "We have all the time in the world." The grandfather clock chimed midnight. The new year had arrived. We stood there in the ruins of our family, holding hands, survivors of a war no one else knew we were fighting. And as the sirens faded into the distance, I knew one thing for certain. We were safe. And we were free. The payoff had arrived, and it was sweeter than I could have ever imagined. The house was empty of monsters, and for the first time in weeks the air was clean. 3 months have passed since the flashing lights of the police cruisers painted my living room walls in chaotic shades of red and blue. The silence in the house now is different. It is not the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb that settled over us during Christmas week. It is the hollow, echoing silence of a chapter ending. The furniture is gone. The crystal chandeliers are covered in dust sheets. The only thing left in the study is my father's desk, which the movers are coming for tomorrow. We stood in the courtroom last week. It was a sterile wood-paneled room that smelled of floor wax and misery. I wore my best suit. Beatrice wore a blue dress that matched her eyes that were sharp and clear and free of any chemical fog. We sat in the front row, holding hands an anchor for each other in the storm. Preston and Tiffany were brought in separately. They didn't look like the power couple of Chicago anymore. They looked like what they were: broken, desperate criminals. Preston had lost 20 pounds. His hair was thinning. He refused to look at me. He kept his eyes on the table, trembling slightly. Tiffany looked worse. The withdrawal from the methamphetamines had ravaged her. Her skin was sallow, her eyes sunken and darting around the room with paranoid intensity. When she saw Beatrice, she flinched, as if she expected my wife to walk over and slap her again. The judge was a stern woman, with no patience for elder abuse. The sentencing was swift and brutal. Preston Foster was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud conspiracy to commit theft and accessory to attempted murder. The judge cited his gambling addiction not as a mitigating factor, but as a proof of his reckless disregard for human life. Tiffany Foster fared worse. Because of her medical background, her actions were deemed premeditated and particularly heinous. She received 18 years for attempted murder, elder abuse, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. When the gavel banged down, it sounded like the final nail in a coffin. As the bailiffs led them away, Preston finally looked at me. His eyes were wet, pleading. He mouthed the word, "Dad." I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I just nodded a final acknowledgement of the stranger he had become. I watched my son vanish behind the heavy steel door, and I felt a strange, cold sense of relief. The structural failure had been contained. The debris had been cleared. But the prison sentence was only half of the punishment. The other half happened on the streets. Vinny the loan shark did not get his $4.5 million from my estate. And Vinny was not a man who wrote off bad debt. I did not intervene. I had the money. I could have written a check that morning and cleared Preston's debt. A younger version of me, the father who wanted to shield his son from every scrape and bruise, might have done it. But that father died the night I found the ledger in the suitcase. Instead, I watched from a distance as Preston's life was dismantled by the underworld. His luxury condo in the city was stripped. His Porsche, his designer watches, his art collection. Everything he had bought with borrowed money vanished overnight. I heard rumors that Vinny's associates had visited Preston in the holding cell before the transfer to prison. I don't know what was said. I don't know what deals were made for his safety on the inside. That is between him and the sharks he chose to swim with. He made a deal with the devil, and now he has 12 years to pay the interest. Beatrice and I spent the last month packing. We decided we couldn't stay in the Chicago house. The walls remembered too much. Every corner held a ghost. The kitchen island where Tiffany mixed the poison. The guest room where Preston plotted my death. The patio where the pig's head had bled onto the concrete. It was a beautiful house, but it was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. We sold it to a nice young family with 3 children. I hope they fill it with better memories than we did. We moved 2 days ago. We traded the gray biting wind of Lake Michigan for the warm, salt-kissed air of Sarasota, Florida. Our new apartment is on the 10th floor. It has floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the Gulf of Mexico. The light here is different. It is golden and forgiving. I am sitting on the balcony now. It is evening. The sun is setting, painting the water in strokes of violet and orange. I have a glass of wine in my hand, a good Cabernet. I poured it myself. I watched the liquid fill the glass dark and pure. Beatrice steps out onto the balcony behind me. She looks healthier than she has in years. The Florida sun has already put a little color in her cheeks. She is wearing a white linen dress that flutters in the breeze. She rests her hand on my shoulder. The touch is warm, grounding. "Are you okay, Harry?" she asks softly. I look at the wine. I look at the ocean. I look at her. I am thinking about the cost, I say. She pulls up a chair and sits beside me. We paid a high price, she agrees. But we bought something valuable. We sit in silence for a long time, watching the waves crash against the shore. The rhythm is steady, predictable, soothing. It is the opposite of the chaos we left behind. I think about the legacy I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave a dynasty. I wanted to leave a son who would carry on my name and my business. I failed at that. The Foster name ends with me, really. Preston will come out of prison, a felon, a broken man. But then I look at Beatrice. I see the clarity in her eyes. I see the smile that Tiffany tried to steal. I see the life that Preston tried to trade for a gambling debt. I saved her. I identified the stress fracture, I calculated the load, and I reinforced the structure before it collapsed. I did my job. I take a sip of wine. It tastes like grapes and oak, not bitterness. People tell you that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that family is everything, that you should forgive anything. Endure anything, sacrifice anything for your children. They are wrong. Family is not just biology. Family is not just DNA shared in a test tube. Family is the people who stand by you when the walls are shaking. Family is the people who protect you when you are weak. Family is safety. Preston was my blood, but he was not my family. He was a parasite. He was a cancer that grew in the dark, feeding on our love and our trust until there was almost nothing left. I had to cut him out. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It felt like cutting off my own arm. But if I hadn't done it, the infection would have killed us both. I lost a son. That is a grief that will sit in my chest until the day I die. There is no fixing that. There is no engineering solution for a broken heart. But I saved my wife. I saved my partner. I saved the person who actually deserves my loyalty. Beatrice reaches over and clinks her glass against mine. The sound is a clear, ringing bell note that drifts out over the ocean. To us, she says. To us, I reply. I drink the wine. I feel the warmth spread through my chest. I take a deep breath of the ocean air, filling my lungs with salt and freedom. We are old. We are tired. We are scarred. But we are here. We are together. And for the first time in a long time, we are safe. The sun dips below the horizon, extinguishing the day. The stars begin to come out, pinning the night sky in place. I put down my glass and take my wife's hand. I hold it tight, marveling at the strength in her fingers. That is a fair trade, I think. It is a fair trade. Family is not defined by the blood running through your veins, but by actions and mutual respect. I learned the painful lesson that sometimes the most dangerous enemy lies within your own home. Blind love does not save corrupted children. It only enables evil. To protect the partner who weathered life's storms with me, I was forced to cut off my own flesh and blood. Never let the word family become a shield that covers up abuse and bottomless greed. True loyalty is earned, not inherited. Did my story make you reflect on the limits of forgiveness? Would you have the courage to send your own child to prison to save your spouse? Share your thoughts and let me know which city you are watching from in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking true story.